Good morning. It's Monday, the 21st of March. Yesterday I wasn't sure about the date. I checked and it was the 20th. Okay. What wakes me up in the middle of the night? I thought I heard the sound of an old toilet reservoir filling like it had been flushed. Well, the problem with that is that I don't have that style toilet around. I don't know what that sound is, but it's a sound that I've heard probably since I was a little boy. I don't know what the significance of it is, but there's a little bit of significance there. As I said, I'm not real happy with the way this camera frames up on the video settings, but we're going to go with it because it's what I have. What's been on my heart is I've been wanting to tell you about sociopaths, sociopathy, sociopathic people. Sociopath. A lot of you run around calling these people psychopaths. A psychopath, psycho means basically somebody who's got a break with reality. And the sociopaths don't have a break with reality. They're actually probably more present in reality than we are, we non sociopaths. Psychologists do not agree upon the definition of these terms very well. If a person is psychotic, basically it means they're out of touch with reality. A sociopath actually appears to have a problem with their socialization. I believe the etiology, the source of their problem or our problem, lies in their social development. I'm not sure about that, but I worked in the Department of Corrections prisons for a while. And I got to the point where I would ask these fellows about sociopaths. Didn't use that term with them generally. I referred to them as the super predators because those guys in the penitentiary had to be able to recognize the guys who were dangerous just to preserve themselves. Anyway, there's a book, and I had to look this up on the internet. It's been so long since I read it, and I'm pretty certain it's no longer in my library, called The People of the Lie. And the subtitle of it was The Hope for Healing Human Evil. It's by M. Scott Peck, published in 1983. It was quite a book, but I could not remember what I had read. And I believe I read this book twice. It was kind of an exercise in getting people to understand and accept evil and hope that evil would change. Poppycock, they aren't going to change, folks. And the problem is that you can't even recognize them for what they are. You don't realize how truly evil and wicked they are because you don't think anybody could think that way. Anybody could be that way. We tend to think that everybody else is just like us. And we don't think that harshly. We don't conjure up all of that bad stuff. We don't plot evil. We don't plan wickedness. But they do. And it's continual. And they think several steps ahead of us. Now, I looked up here and I've got the computer going. The people of the lie. The hope for healing human evil. Now, I know a lot of you say Jesus saves. Jesus can save anyone. Well, the thing is that there may be predestination. And I don't really like Calvinism very much. I really think Arminius was correct in that argument. I think that humans have free will. Calvin said that we were all predestined. It really didn't matter too much. Calvin was one of those guys that hid among us. Forgive me. I think that I burped a little bit there because it's making me sick to my stomach. It's kind of symbolic of the subject. Calvin's real name was Cohen, Cauin, And there might have been an apostrophe in it because he was a name changer. Um, it was an abbreviation for the standard Cohen, Cohen, and the great Calvinistic um, philosophy that impacted all of Protestantism was from a man who was from the Jewish faith. He was one of them, a member of the tribes. He had a good argument. He made major contributions. A lot of people believe in Calvinism because we are chosen before we're born, perhaps. And we've got that saying that, we didn't choose God, God chose us. Well, there's a little bit of truth to that. But there's a lot of truth to Arminius. As a matter of fact, there was so much truth that the bad guys had to persecute those folks. As a matter of fact, the Arminians suffered a major genocide. And we're not supposed to talk about that because it's supposed to have been the Young Turks who genocided them. And I'm just going to take a guess that the year was 1910. I really need to look this up on the computer to give it to you properly. But the Young Turks were actually members of the tribe as well. And that's a big secret that they don't want you to know. The estimation was that 1.5 million, 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million were genocided. And the pictures of this genocide are absolutely horrible. You have young women with long brunette hair who were childbearing age or younger, crucified, hung from crosses along the road, just one after the other, naked and hung up there, miles of them. It was one of the most horrible atrocities. And of course, Turkey doesn't want us to talk about this and recognize this because they get blamed for it. But the people who actually did that were members of the tribe, as we've called them the Khazarian Mafia. So, people of the lie, the hope for healing human evil. Here it reads, under Goodreads, Peck unveils his dissatisfaction with psychology's attempt, or lack thereof, they didn't spell that right, at naming evil. This, in fact, is the stated purpose of the book. Oh, there goes my screen. And you could tell it lights me up pretty well. All right, where did it go? The darn page shifted. I don't like this modern. I don't like these new operating systems. Oh, come on. Where did my mouse go to? And I can't. There we go. Takes on the people of the lie. Peck takes on the topic of evil. The volume cited is not an abridgment. Okay, it's rather interesting because there was a second book, and the first one was a popular series, and I read it twice. It was assigned in a lot of colleges. That's probably when I picked it up. I was starting to study psychology then. I was starting to rebuild my life again, undergraduate psychology. And Peck describes the stories of people who came to him whom he found particularly resistant to any form of help. Well, folks, we have to stop helping these evil people. And I really think the big question is, can Jesus save these guys? I don't think he wants to. I mean, the hope for healing human evil. We were just starting to recognize it back then. We can't understand it. We aren't evil. Okay. It's interesting because he talked about evil, and he says, when I say that evil has to do with killing, I do not mean to restrict myself to corporeal murder. Evil is that which kills spirit. Okay. He really covered a very broad spectrum. He tried to give us hope. He tried to make it so that we would be more willing to help these people, more willing to identify it and name it. The problem is that we have sociopaths that walk in and among us. They know who we are. They understand the social rules perfectly. They manipulate the social contract, the social rules. They manipulate us very well. The best book is Martha Stout's book, published in 2006. And that was, it actually was out and available in 2005. But it was presented as a 2006 publication. I picked it up in about November or December of 2005. Actually, it was sooner than that, I believe. My wife, the woman I attempted to marry, was giving me grief, and I was working as a psychologist, and my supervising psychologist, John Forsyth, at the prisons, and another psychologist, they were both, actually there were probably 3 people there that they had the book. They showed it to me, said, this is the book all psychologists are reading. And they understood what I was dealing with. I was dealing with a sociopath or a woman who was sociopathic. And I was naive to it. They don't teach us this in school. This was a new concept. Martha Stout, I believe she worked in the field for 50 years, for half a century. She was the expert. I don't know if she's still alive. It's a wonderful book, about 200 pages long. I urge you to get it and to read it so that you can understand these people. This is not a professional textbook. This is written for the layperson. The most important thing is that we have to realize that these people are not like the rest of us, that they lay traps for us. I've run into several sociopaths. The most recent one, I probably did not recognize the most recent one. And for you folks who think, well, these are murderers, they do all kinds of stuff. No, generally speaking, you're going to find sociopaths at the head of corporations or politicians. For some reason, these evil ones are drawn to politics and drawn to running corporations because they are so wicked. They lay traps for so many of us. They hurt people. They enjoy doing this. They like it because they enjoy exercising their power over us, over others. So I really want you to become aware of what a sociopath is. You have to, because according to Martha Stout, 1 out of every 25 of us is a sociopath. I believe, and by the way, in Japan, it's only 1.7% of the Japanese are sociopathic. I believe it's because it's a more homogeneous society. They don't like diversity. They don't embrace diversity. For one, they won't allow Muslims into their country. They just don't want different people. And they also do not intermarry very well. They're a very stable type, stable phenotype. They're proud. They want to race mix, so they don't do it. And because of that, their rate of sociopathy is much lower than ours. America has always been a fairly diverse place. You've got people the people who settled here didn't do well where they were at over in Europe. You've got a lot of people who were brought over here as slave labor. You've got a lot of people that came over as white slaves. You had many states. Well, the state of Georgia, by Oglethorpe, he brought over inmates, prisoners, so it was founded by prisoners. Georgia's kind of a colorful population because of that. Now, my estimation is that as our culture deteriorates and as we mix up, as we do all of this race mixing, ethnic mixing, whatever you want to call it, this this diversity, it's not making us stronger, folks. It increases the rate of sociopathy. And in the United States of America today, I would estimate that we've surpassed 7% sociopathy. So it's no longer 1 out of every 25. It's probably getting closer to 1 out of every 15. It's getting worse, and it's going to get worse. Why? Well, because these politicians lie to us. These corporations lie to us. The evil ones have got us brainwashed into believing that we have to embrace diversity. It's good for us. Look, folks, when you have a stable population, a consistent population, everybody understands what to expect from everybody else. You have that consistency. You have what we call the social contract, the psychological contract. One of my graduate student professors was really big on the social contract. He was of the opinion that there was a social contract and you had to abide by it. You couldn't break it. Well, the problem was that it's kind of a slippery concept. And the problem is that sociopathy is a slippery concept. The sociopath challenges my assumptions, challenges my training. Generally speaking, in psychology, we divide things according to whether or not it's hereditary or its environment. And what we mean by environment is that it's learned. So in other words, if it's learned, then it can be unlearned. If it's learned, then we can modify that. We can reinforce good behavior. The problem with the sociopath is that it might be hardwired. We just don't know. And that's also kind of a distasteful topic to us because we assume everybody's the same as us. That's not true. Not everybody is the same as us. You've got people that come from totally different traditions in this country. They don't mix well with the rest of us. They don't mix well because they don't have the background. In case you're wondering, a lot of what we learn may be inherited genetically. So the other concept is that the sociopath is a genetic aberration. Now, here is part of the reason why I like the term sociopath. Because when I asked sociopaths themselves, and I worked with them, I had to offer them mental health services in the prisons. When I asked the sociopaths that I knew whether or not they thought that their sociopathy was from, were they born that way or did they develop that way? One in particular who I got to know quite well, he told me that it was developed socially. He felt that it was his childhood, it was his rearing. And this fellow told me he murdered people, told me other things. Now, I abided by the requirements at the Arizona Department of Corrections. Capital crimes like that I was required to report, and I did a proper informed consent. And I let the inmates know, hey, you tell me about an unsolved capital offense, I'm going to report it. I did report it, and he was interviewed. And he later told me that they were interviewing him. And I said, well, yes, I told you what I do. I told you what I do on that. I'm required to report that. Here goes the computer screen, which is providing my light. So I do want you to get this book by Martha Stout. I want you to read it. I want you to be well armed so that you can recognize a sociopath. The other problem is we're dealing with a sociopathic culture, and we have to realize that. We have to be able to recognize them for what they are. And I know a lot of you out there say, well, Jesus saves. He can save them. He can change them. Well, the last fellow that I ran into, I actually propose that. I actually prayed about that, and I made a statement at one point that we're going to find out whether or not Jesus can save a sociopath. Because why not? Why not? Why not pray to Yahshua? Save this guy, convert this fellow, this man. Didn't happen, folks. It's not going to happen. The fellow never recanted. He never straightened himself. He took my inheritance from me. I was dependent. I was dependent on that. I can't depend on it now, but he took that. My father had saved up a huge amount for us 3 children, and I got my 3rd. And unfortunately, I had bad advice. And the bad advice came from my CPA, who pressured me into shipping my wealth to this fellow. Motorhome Springs weren't able to handle it. I asked my brother to give me the lightest of the divisions, and he refused to do it. Told me, go read the inventories, make a choice. And unfortunately, the choice I made was the heaviest of them, and it collapsed the springs on the motorhome, and it wasn't safe to drive down the Alcan that way. And my CPA, distant relative, told me that he seemed like a nice guy. Ship the coins to them and pay him for the storage and pick them up when you get there. Well, I also wanted this fellow wanted to buy the coins, and I wanted to sell some of them. But more than that, I wanted to find out what I had. I didn't understand the numismatic values, and I was expecting to pay this fellow for his expertise. I was expecting that I told him not to open this stuff up till I got there down in Houston, and he went ahead and opened them. He mixed them up. I don't want to tell you too much, folks, because there's legal action going to be, there's an insurance claim going to be filed here, and that's going to probably go legal. So what I want to tell you is that these people walk freely among us. They plan evil for us and harm for us. They're always a couple of steps ahead of us. You cannot, according to Martha Stout, you can't outwit the sociopath. You can't beat a sociopath. All you can do is slip away and walk away when you detect one of them. Oh, and the other thing is you won't even detect them. You might catch a glimpse of them as we walk away, according to Martha Stout. And she's quite right. But there's so much evil, literal evil in the world today that we have to be able to grow up and be able to accept the fact that there's some bad people. These people were born to harm us. When we do not live according to Yahweh's commandments, then this evil, he created this evil too, folks. And this evil is purposeful. It's to sift us. It's to test us. It's to try us. It's to see whether or not we're going to follow Yahweh's law. I think there were... Okay, let me get back on subject. Another thought that was taking me in another direction, which I think is important. And we will get to, I'm pretty sure. But what I want you to know is what a sociopath is. I want you to get Martha Stout's book. Now, Martha Stout says the telltale sign of the sociopath is the pity party. The pity party. In other words, they tell you about their problems. And they're not sincerely suffering. They tell you about their problems in a fashion to render us defenseless. Because when our defenses are down and we're trying to help these sons of a bitches, that's when they take advantage of us. That's when they con us. So the telltale sign of a sociopath is they will accuse you of what they themselves are doing. Now, that sociopathic wife of mine, and I remind you, I'm technically a single man because I got that annulled. That sociopathic wife of mine would argue with me every Sunday for 2.5 hours at a time, and it was horrible. It was terrible. And, I was a working man. I had to work a pretty hard job. I had to be fresh, and here she was wearing me out the day before I start my work week. And my work week was a tough job. It was 10 hours a day, 2 hours of commuting. And there she was, wearing me out every Sunday. It was hurting my spirit. She was beating me up spiritually, psychologically. And you would think, well, John, you're a man. You can take it, right? No. No, you cannot take a sociopath's battering no matter what. And it was constant. And it seemed like she revealed one time, she said that she knew that regardless of what I was doing to her, it wasn't even a tenth of what she was doing to me. That was like an admission that slipped through the crack, that let me know that she's aware of what's going on. This ugly spirit that really is this person, that really is this woman that's in this beautiful body and pretends to be good, is actually quite evil. I finally had it with these arguments on Sunday, because it was every Sunday. It was relentless. And I finally told her, you're hurting me. You got to leave. You got to go. I don't know where that came from in me. I really appreciate that part of my spirit that spoke up and said that. It just took a little bit longer for her to leave, and then she sort of surprised me. So she left me and went to a friend of mine's house. Sought shelter there and convinced the friend of how evil I was. Little bit of lesbianism there. Actually, I didn't find that out till later, but she went over there, and I think that the two of them got it on. I think she seduced my older female friend from church over there. I really think that happened. I would go over to my female friend's house. She'd invite me over for dinner and stuff. She had a nice job, made a lot more money than I did, very nice house. And she would have her girlfriends over, and the feminists were there, the lesbians were there. And it was nice to be invited over. She was an excellent cook. She cooked up some nice stuff, but I didn't really fit in with the girls. Some of those women made it pretty clear that they didn't appreciate me being there. And I think my friend was actually interested in me, but I was not interested in her. She was older, couldn't have children. And I liked my friend quite a bit. I've always had women for friends until this latter part of my life. Now I'm not friends with many women at all. I used to believe that men and women could be friends. I don't really believe that anymore. I think women are predators, to be honest with you, especially in our culture. They're very predatory. I think that we lie to ourselves by saying that, we men are the predators. We're the dominant ones. And we're the ones that supposedly start the relationships and pursue the woman. But I got news for you folks. Women know about us way before we know about them. Another thing I found out that I should mention right now is that among primates, females select their mates. The women do the choosing, folks. This thing about men doing the choosing and doing the pursuing is bullshit. It's bovine excrement. It's not quite true. Yeah, women size us up. They go after us, and they arrange it so that we think that we're actually, pursuing them and we're dominant. There's a surface dynamic, an outer dynamic, and an inner dynamic. On the outer dynamic, it appears as though, there we go with that. It appears as though we're pursuing them. But in the inner dynamic, they're really controlling and pursuing us. When you have somebody who keeps accusing you of things that you're not doing and keeps gaslighting you, keeps bamboozling you, keeps the pressure on you to believe that you're doing things that you aren't doing, there's a problem. Typically, they will accuse you of doing what they are doing. We've seen it play out in politics. We've seen Democrats accusing Republicans of what they were doing, especially in terms of buddying up with Mr. Putin. They accused Mr. Trump of being an agent for the Russians. If anybody was an agent for the Russians, it would have been Hillary Clinton. Certainly not Donald Trump. She sold 10 or 20% of our uranium. I mean, this uranium's got a lot of value, folks, especially if you want to have a green economy. You got to have uranium. She sold 20% of our uranium stocks to Putin. And who knows where the uranium is? It's probably being used by North Korea, and it'll probably be used by Iran, and it probably will be used to make bombs to be used against us. She did that. I consider it high treason myself. She sold it through a company in Canada. It was a front. Why she's never been brought to task and tried for treason just shows how well connected she is. And the guys that run the planet are sociopaths. They're not merely sociopathic. They're real sociopaths. They cannot be saved. Don't try to go around converting them. They can't be converted. They're not one of us. There's so much you need to understand. Salvation requires that you be a party to the old covenants, the original covenants. And we're talking about the covenant started with Abram. So you've got to be a descendant of Abraham. That's the first qualification. And so in that sense, there's definitely predestination. That has been decided before you were born. That's the first part. You have to be a party to the covenants. The second part, according to Dr. Kent, is that you have to form a personal relationship with Jesus, if you want to call him that, I'll go with that, with Yeshua. And then the thing is that you're not supposed to actually worship Yeshua. You're supposed to worship the Father, his Father, our Father, your Father, my Father, Yahweh. Yeshua said he had to do his Father, he was doing his Father's will. And when you read that New Testament, the basic lesson I get is that I need to be doing our Father's will as well. So rather than focus strictly upon Jesus, I think we need to focus upon Yeshua's example. He set a very good example for us. Look at his behavior that we have written down. Look at his behavior and see if you find patterns and mimic those patterns. Do what he did. Behavior matters more than probably anything else. Good intentions are a problem, but when you check a person's behavior, you understand their character and what they're really trying to do. The problems that we have overseas and at home are the same. We don't understand Mr. Putin. We don't understand Mr. Biden. We don't understand Mr. Trump. We don't understand these gentlemen. And frankly, they all appear to be puppets to me. They all appear to be controlled by the same people in the background. There's not any difference between them. They all seem to be involved in these secret societies in very high levels. They're members of the club, and you and I aren't. They aren't supposed to rule over us because they're not our brothers. The Bible's pretty explicit. Yahweh said no one shall rule over you except one of your brothers. It was against the law for us to choose an outsider to rule over us. Now, there was a people who didn't like themselves or didn't trust themselves. They didn't trust each other to the point where their law was they had to have an outsider as king. Only an outsider could be their king and rule over them. And those people were at Mount Seir. They were known as the Edomites. They required a king, that they choose a king, it had to be somebody that wasn't one of them because they didn't trust each other. That's how much of liars and thieves they were, folks. That's how evil they were. We're going to get into all of this because you got to understand this stuff. Anyway, I'm trying to keep these down. I don't know what to call this. I really don't want to call it The People of the Lie. I don't really want to feature Mr. Scott Peck's book. I think Mr. Scott Peck was naive. I prefer Martha Stout's book, The Sociopath Next Door. I need you to read that. It's a great exercise. You will realize that even a psychologist can be a sociopath. You will realize that there are all kinds of most sociopaths don't commit murder. They aren't murderers. They're too smart for that. They have too much fun manipulating us and taking advantage of the rest of us. They love exercising their power. They regard you and me as fish, suckers. That's all we are to them. Sadly, in our naivety and our good nature, and they know us for our good nature, they predate upon us. They take advantage of us. And we are dealing with a sociopathic culture at large, writ large. It's a sociopathic culture. They took over the United States of America and they rule us today. They hate us. Their purpose is to destroy us. They come from the evil ones. Where did the evil ones come from? We covered that already. You really need to keep up with my little speeches here, my little presentations or dissertations, whatever you want to call this. I prefer to think of it as our little talks. I'm hoping that you're paying attention. I'm hoping that I'm reaching you. I'm hoping that you help me grow my audience. I hope that you'll buy my Bible. It is the best Bible. You need to read it. We need to grow. We need to realize that there's some problems in the Bible. It's not very hard to get there. The evil ones were involved in the transmutation of it, the translation of it. They've laid traps in there for us. They came out with their own Bible to throw us off track so they could take over our nation. That was part of the grand conspiracy, which they think real long range. Their conspiracy and evil is intergenerational, so their own children keep it going. And in case you're wondering, some of these great men today that are on the scenes, you ought to look at the pedigrees, folks. You ought to look at where they come from, because you're going to find out that some of their parents were some of the most wicked people in the last century. You're going to find we're dealing with the descendants, the children, the grandchildren. Oh, I will name one of them for you. Shiftless. I like that. Sounds like syphilis. Schiff. Adam Schiff? Is that his first name? Gee, I wonder who he's a descendant of. Who else was called Schiff, folks? Go look it up. You're going to find that Mr. Schiff's, I think it's grandfather. I thought it would be his father, but it's probably grandfather. Adam Schiff's grandfather is the man that basically got us into World War I. In the Bible, it would refer to him as his father. In the Bible, they skip generations. They omit generations sometimes. But Mr. Schiff, Jacob Schiff, got us into World War I. So, folks, this is a perfect example of a line of sociopaths. That's all there is to it. It's a public figure. I'm allowed to criticize him. In my opinion, and he's got those bug eyes, the thyroid condition, perhaps, that underlying stuff. He's lied in the Senate. I wish we had a real Senate with real statesmen, because they'd throw him out. But of course, if we had a constitutional Senate, the state legislature that he came from would recall him, would fire him in an instant, recall him home to the seat to which he was elected, and he would no longer be a senator for the state representing the state government in Washington, D.C. You see, folks, we don't have a republic anymore. The republic was the parties to the republic weren't you or I. It was our states. Our states authorized and signed off on this Constitution. They had representation. The state governments no longer have representation. Why? The 17th Amendment called for the direct election of senators. Senators, until what, 1917, 1913, whenever that 17th Amendment was passed. And by the way, how we got there was the Congress wanted to get paid and the senators wanted to be elected directly so that they could become senators for life. So you got to go back to getting rid of the 17th Amendment. Senators were elected from their state legislators. Those guys argued among themselves and they voted to who was going to represent them. And then they sent them to Washington, D.C. They were subject to instant recall. In other words, if the senator, and the Senate is supposed to be a slower process of the legislative bodies, and it's supposed to be more difficult. It's supposed to be protective of us. It's a stalwart. It's supposed to protect us a little bit more just in case Congress isn't acting right. Does Congress act right? Oh, man. Anyway, we've got to return to the original structure the founders gave us. Maybe we can do that peaceably. I rather doubt it because these sociopaths that run the place right now aren't going to give up power. And by the way, I'm not merely referring to the sociopaths who lead these corporations, the sociopaths who serve on these interlocking corporate boards, and the politicians. I'm referring to the sociopaths behind the scenes that control all of this, that call the shots. And I'm not going to tell you who they are. You've got to figure this out for yourself. I'm going to tell you that they all come from Cain. And it took me a long time to sort this out. I am not responsible for your education. I paid dearly for mine. You are responsible for your own education. That was one of the lessons of one of my psychologist teachers. She was quite brainy. She got into trouble herself. Oh, yeah. Men can be sexually harassed. She put pressure on me. I was going to increase my grade if I did well, you know what. And I'm sorry, I just couldn't go there. And there was a lot of pressure put on me from her and her best friend to engage her, and I was an undergraduate student in psychology. I was a little bit older at the time. Anyway, I didn't like crossing bounds like that. I actually was reared at a time, the golden era of our nation, in which we men were trained that if we looked at a woman and we found ourselves attracted to her, we instantly judged ourselves. We instantly felt guilty. And we turned away. We turned our eyes away. We were ashamed. Men aren't like that today. The only way you're going to get men like that again is to go back to the homogenized society that started this nation. Go back to the original construction of the electorate. Get the original proportions, which they did maintain in the South American countries for quite a while. They were smarter than us, and we had some really bad politicians that gave us some bad policies. As a result, we've become a polyglot, and we don't get along very well with each other. We're never going to mix and adhere to one another. It's just not a possibility. We've got all sorts of people from other cultures that just aren't compatible, and they're expecting us to change our ways, yet they love us for what we are, but they want to change us, so they're destroying us from within. This is an old technique from the Assyrians. Read the Bible, folks. A lot of lessons in there. What you'll find is that the Assyrians repopulated Samaria with outsiders, and those people became known as Sumerians. And they were looked down upon by the other Israelites because they weren't descendants of Israel, the man. They weren't descendants of Adam. Oh, by the way, not all white people are descendants of Israel. A lot of Adam's descendants, a lot of the Caucasoids were members of other cultures, other nations. So not all Not all of us white people are of the Israelites. That's impossible. Don't go around thinking that. Don't be stupid white supremacists. That's a horrible place to be. We are the servant race. We are those who are intended to serve with God. We're supposed to serve other people as well. But in this day and age, they're taking advantage of us, and they are destroying us. And they have reduced us from the peak in approximately 1933 at, I think it was 30%, maybe 33%. I think it was 30% of the world's populations were Caucasoids back then. Now I know that we went below 7.5%, down below 6%. They're reducing us, folks. We're probably only 5% of the Earth's population. And this is the time, if not cut short, all flesh would perish. That flesh word in the Bible is referring to all of Adam kind would perish. That's my opinion, folks. Now, if I'm wrong, correct me. Read the Bible for yourself. Make determinations for yourself. Don't let any son of a bitch tell you what the Bible means. Don't even let me tell you what it means. I'm going to tell you what I think it means. I hope you'll tell me what you think as well. I leave the comment section open because it's the early part of this show, of this channel. I need your help. I need your comments. I want your suggestions. I do want your guidance. I do believe in the body politic. I believe in the body of our people. I believe that we need to talk more. We need to gather more and talk together, because wherever two or more are gathered in Yeshua's name, there the Holy Spirit will be. We are the reservoirs of the Holy Spirit. We carry that stuff with us. It's in our hearts. The law is etched on our hearts. We know right from wrong. We're pretty much born that way. So you got to read the prophets, folks. They tell you about the new covenant. And Yahweh said he was going to make a new covenant with the same people he made the old covenants. He hasn't thrown his people away. There isn't a new group. There's identity theft, and that's what we are victims of. The biggest identity theft in the history of the world, at least the history of the world since this last cycle began, this last age began. And we are at the cusp of another age. And I believe this planet is designed so that whatever we are doing affects this stuff. It's believed from my former pastor that rain occurs because of an organism that lives in the upper atmosphere. And this organism smells us, if you will, senses us. I think it smells us. And when we put off the wrong pheromones, it withholds water from us. I also believe that we probably have got weather wars going on, weather modification going on as well. But I believe that when a population deviated and was evil, that they put off a horrible smell, and these organisms up above decided they weren't going to produce rain on that population. I think that might be the case. I don't know. Maybe one of you out there could actually educate me, educate us on that. Feel free to leave links below. You know that you can contact me through my blog, givingpsychologyaway.com. I haven't got my old email addresses going. I've got to do that. I just finally found the damn password, and I've got several of those. I haven't populated all of the email addresses spaces. I've been hoping to enlarge my team. I was hoping that my family would want to have email addresses that would at least bolster up my domain, build my name, my reputation. What do they call that? Yes, I'm getting older. I'm not talking with people enough. I think that by talking more, I'd probably be a little bit sharper, and things would come to mind rather quickly. So I'm just going to keep these things up as long as they are. It's only 4:14 in the morning here. A little on the cool side. I rather like that. The key points I want you to take away are that evil exists. It was in the garden. It was the serpent who seduced Eve, who had sex with Eve and produced Cain. Cain was a hybrid. The evil people we are dealing with today are the descendants of Cain. There were 200 fallen angels, so we only have one of them identified in the Garden of Eden. I don't know what happened to the rest of them. I don't know what their children are like or where they are at. Maybe they're okay. I just don't know. I don't think so. I rather doubt it, because they all conspired at Mount Hermon. According to Enoch, there were 200 angels there, and they conspired to go into the daughters of men because they found the daughters of men fair. They thought, hey, we're going to go have sex with these babes. And they did. And they decided they were going to keep it secret. And they weren't even going to discuss it among themselves once they left Mount Hermon. And in case you're wondering, the figure of 200 fallen angels is also in a book about Solomon. I don't have a reference to that. I don't know where it is. It exists, though. Solomon was the ring bearer, and he was actually able to capture the angels according to a task supposedly given to him by Yahweh, because he knew the name of the angel, and by knowing the name of the spirit, you have power over the spirit. And he had a ring with the name of each angel on the ring, and he put the rings on their hands, and he carted several of them off to prison deep within the earth, to Tartarus. That's in the Bible. We've got a reference there, folks. There's got to be books on that somewhere that tell the rest of the story that were purposely deleted from the Bible. According to different sources, well, we know the Bible mentions 36 books that are not in the Bible proper. So those are valid books to read and to study. There's also a citation that Ezra in the Apocrypha rewrote the books. And in one of those translations, it says he rewrote 150 books. I don't see that in the Bible today. We have folks like Pastor Paul Burnham, who passed away, and we lost his library, and sadly his heir, who he got suckered into, threw the books away from what we can tell. I mean, I tried to buy them from her. She was offended. I think she just tossed them away because she just suckered Paul in to get his inheritance. So anybody can be suckered in by these sociopaths, folks. I got suckered into one big one. There may be a couple of them over in Houston that got to me. I think they might have worked together and worked on me. As another psychologist friend tells me, it's the perfect storm. Pray for me, folks. I want my inheritance back. There was enough money there to buy a brand new Cayenne Turbo GT, which is going to be more rare than a Porsche GT3. I think they're really starting at $220,000. I could have bought one of those. That's not how I would spend the money if I had it right now. Not at all. This economy is going to collapse. Hold on to your old American constitutional currency. It's going to be very valuable. That's true wealth. These rat bastards stole everything from us, including, our silver and our gold. They stole the land. I mean, there's so many frauds they perpetrated on us. It's not funny. We have to return to Yahweh, pray to Yahweh. We have to read the Bible. We have to read the Constitution. We have to read the Declaration of Independence. And another book you need to read is A Sociopath Next Door. I think it's very important. Another book you need to read is called A Fruit from a Poisonous Tree by an attorney named Stamper, a really noble attorney who actually reveals what happened. You need that book. One person said it was the 6th most important book in the world. Another book that's important is Sex and Culture, published in 1934. It's important because the social psychologist who wrote that book actually discovered some things about human nature, which we have to talk about. The basic premise of his book, his conclusion was that once female sexuality became unbridled, he came to 2 conclusions. The first was you could never put it back in the bottle. and that the second was any culture in which female sexuality became unbridled disappeared from the face of the earth. I don't think that he knew about Mr. Hitler. Mr. Hitler didn't come to power until the year after he wrote the book. He actually wrote the book in 1932. Unwin, Unwin. You can get a PDF on the internet. It's a massive work, 750 pages long. I suggest you get that and save that and put it on your computer. I believe that the genie can be put back in the bottle. I believe that we can restore the family. We can restore proper values. You see, ladies, the evil ones went after you because they knew that you are the backbone of our morality. And in case you wonder where I got that phrase from, that's from Ione Griffin Kent, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who was college educated in 1917. Women didn't go to college even in the 50s very much. She was college educated and she was really smart, and it was one of the precious lessons I got from that woman. And she was so well loved and respected that when she passed away, we had to move the funeral from the funeral home to the church. And even the church downtown in Newmarket couldn't contain everybody. People came from miles around and miles away because she had corresponded and touched so many people's hearts. She's on the internet somewhere. I think that I've archived her in one of my old blogs. Go to my blog, givingpsychologyaway.com. You'll find things that I state there that I cannot state here. I'm doing my best to be careful and mind my P's and Q's and not offend people. If I offend you, I apologize. If the Bible offends you, I don't apologize. If you find something offensive in the Bible, then there's something really wrong with you. You need to resolve that. You need to resolve that for yourself. If you take offense at something in the Bible, maybe we've got one of those sections that wasn't translated properly. Maybe we've got a word that was done wrongly. We need to look at that. If you find something that's offensive, maybe you need to read the Bible well enough so that you can figure out how it might be true. That was the third stage I went through in my Bible reading, was I decided, since this part of the Bible says this and this says that, how can these things be true? I mean, they say the opposite, seemingly opposite things. Well, when you synthesize those and bring those together to figure out what the missing pieces are, your knowledge base will increase. It really is a book written at many different levels. You want stories about aliens? You want stories about wars? They're in there. There's even a story that I read a long time ago that I haven't located in quite a while, in which one city launched some sort of light at another city, a missile blast or laser blast, and destroyed the other city. And the city that had done the harm to the other city, it sounds like in the Bible, they had so much remorse that they left. Well, when did that occur? Was that from a previous Earth age? More than likely. It's in the Bible. There's a lot in there, including the origins of our different species on this planet. As you know, I prefer to think of us as different species rather than different races. I think that fits the biblical narrative better. When I read the Bible and I read that phrase, kind after kind, I don't think it's race after race. I think it's species after species. I think that overlays quite nicely into what we call men today, all of those on the planet. And if you really love and want to embrace diversity, it would seem like you would want to know where you came from. You would want to know what's in your DNA. You would want to know, gee, do I have a little bit of Dragon Man, that recently discovered humanoid, in my blood, in my DNA? Do I have some Neanderthal in my blood? Do I have Cro-Magnon? Do I have a little bit of Denison and stuff? What have I inherited? Who am I? What am I? And most of you in the European nations, in Great Britain, the United States of America, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Scandinavian countries, Finland, Russia, beautiful Russia, Belarus, Jeez, Iceland? Dan settled Iceland from what I can tell, and it's a pretty pure population. And there's even an island in the Mediterranean that has stayed to themselves, so they're actually a rather pure population from the old Bible stock. And they are said that that's what their mission was to preserve the old seed, to preserve some of us, to be a remnant or a residue among us at this point. We are down to a remnant, and what we will be reduced to a residue from what I read in the Minor Prophet. Zechariah. There's a war described in there, a nuclear war. Read it. There's biological war described in the books as well. It's in there, folks. We are headed that way. It's not going to be peace on the earth. We're at war right now, and it's a psychological war to a large extent. A lot of psychological operations going on, a lot of psyops. This thing in the Ukraine is nothing but a big psyop. I think they're going to eventually succeed in killing people and destroying some buildings over there, but I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that we will discover that we're being had again and manipulated. And remember, the peacekeepers are blessed. Blessed are the peacekeepers, the peacemakers. We've got to make peace over there. Let's not fuel the fire over there. Let's back off. Do I like Putin? Do I trust Putin? I think he's another New World Order jackass, aligned with Davos and aligned with that Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab. You know, that stuff's pure evil, folks. And you need to look at their pedigree. Klaus Schwab, we know who he's descendants of, so he's representing the bad guys. He's one of them, folks. There's a lot of them running around, and they took over our nation from within. They've been misusing American might, our blood, and our treasure. They've been shedding as rapidly as they can. They've enslaved us as best they can, and they want to do that, and they're going to keep on destroying us. Do I think that this is a war to destroy the Ukraine? No. I think this is a war to destroy what's left of the United States of America. I think this is a war to destroy what's left of our people, of my people, folks. Remember, America was prophesied in the Bible. Israel, the man, told his son Manasseh he was going to be a great nation, the great nation, which is here, folks. You're in it. You and I are the descendants of Manasseh. Ephraim, his older brother, became a company of nations, which was Great Britain. Who destroyed Great Britain? Who manipulated their pound and destroyed the wealth of that nation? That guy's still running around free, folks. He should have been tried, convicted, charged, and all that a long time ago. Now he's doing his best to destroy our currency over here. Folks, there's only one way to beat these guys, is to return to the Constitution and embrace it. The Constitution, I consider it a holy document. And a lot of people that run around in this movement that I've been hanging out with, some of these folks, those jackasses think that all of our founders were evil and they were deists rather than worshiping Yahweh. I don't think they got a right to decide what a man is made of and what a man does. I think you have to look at his fruits. And I think the fruits of our founding fathers were pretty good, especially when you compare them to the rest of the planet. You got to understand, it wasn't a rebellion, a bloody rebellion against our king. We begged him for 4 years. We sent letters. We petitioned the king to defend us, to protect us, and he refused to do it, and he cut us loose. He gave us our independence. Then, after he saw that we were actually prevailing, we were beating back the Indians, beating back the French, then he decided he wanted us back again. That's when he attacked us. So it was a war of self-defense. It was not an act of rebellion. It wasn't like the French Revolution. And by the way, the evil ones were behind that too. The Jacobins were behind that. And you need to understand that the Jacobins There's actually a man whose last name was Jacobin, and a lot of you think he was a great man. Winston was no great man. He was an alcoholic and he was a pedophile. And he spent that war getting drunk, drinking whiskey in the basement, buggering children. He was a depressive guy, and he was, real last name, he was a descendant of the Jacobins. You need to learn this stuff, folks. It's very important. You need to look at your own pedigree. When you're considering getting married, you need to look at her pedigree. In case you're wondering, intelligence, from what I can tell, is inherited from the mother. So you got to find a woman who's pretty smart. And I know that we want to be dominant, but you need a smart woman. She's a good gift. Oh, and by the way, character seems to be inherited from fathers. And you got to be careful, boys, because whatever you do gets encoded on your DNA and gets passed along. RNA encodes DNA. I learned that in the old Psychology 101 textbooks. I think I may have thrown those out when I had to clean the house up, the parents' house. Those studies of the planaria have been removed from psychology texts. I wonder why. Well, the enteric nervous system, the nervous system of the gut, was removed from psychology books in 1948. So why did they dumb down psychologists? Folks, they're into everything. They're everywhere, and you got to realize that the only way you're going to beat them is to educate yourself and to get and build the Spirit of God. Access the mind of Yahweh, Creator, Father God. The only way you can do that is by exercising your mind, sitting on your derriere, and reading the Bible. We all should have been schooled in that to begin with. It's the perfect beginning of knowledge, the perfect beginning of education. In case you're wondering, the old college entrance examinations in this nation back when we were a free country were very simple. You had to translate a chapter from the Bible, and you had to translate it into Greek. And then, actually, I think they probably translated into Latin first, and then from Latin into Greek. So these boys, these 14-year-old, 13-year-old boys, were able to translate the Bible from English into Greek into Latin. They understood those languages that well. They were that brainy. Do you know Latin? Can you translate like that? Do you know Greek? You know them well enough you can translate from one to the other? That was your college entrance examination. We've gotten so far away from it now that we're not allowed to use that. That's discriminatory. Well, the reason they don't want you reading your Bible is you're going to discover the truth about your heritage, the truth about yourself. You're going to discover who the bad guys are and who you are, and you're going to be able to defend yourself against them. There is no better defense. Your gun's not going to be much of a defense. Folks, they've got ray guns. They've got guns that do all kinds of stuff that you and I don't know about. I'll tell you about some of those in the future here, but you know damn well they've got stuff that's super whatever. They've got those lasers in the planes that they've been using to light up our skies in California in particular. They've got platforms in space that do the same darn thing. Yeah, they've got all of these stupid-ass weapons up there that you and I aren't supposed to know about. But a lot of you people out there know about these things. But don't be afraid to arm yourselves up with good old ball and powder. Gunpowder is pretty nice because they can't take the bullets out of once they're launched. And they're afraid of those things because they know that we actually can inflict a lot of harm. Folks, get my Bible. Go to my blog. Go to the link that's going to be down below. Get that Bible. Start reading it. You're going to be able to think clearer reading that Bible than any other version. Do I recommend other versions? Yes, I do. I recommend that you study these other extra biblical books. The book of Jasher. Why do you want to read the book of Jasher? Jasher will explain the character of the people at Mount Seir to you, so you can identify who they are today much better. They will explain the character of Sodom to you. And Sodom wasn't just known for sodomy, folks. Sodom was much more wicked than that. I mean, it was really a bad place. And so you need to understand the character. And by the way, we did discover the ruins, the tell of Sodom, the tell of Gomorrah. We excavated that probably about 15 years ago at this point. We discovered a crystal down there at the blast zone level, and that crystal only exists in nuclear explosion sites. So we know that Yahweh sent his angels and they used nukes on Sodom and Gomorrah. So it truly was hellfire and brimstone. We also see that it's possible that we might see some hellfire and brimstone used upon us today because that's what we deserve. We are Sodom 2.0. Right now, we don't enforce the laws. I can't get the police in Houston to enforce the laws. I can't tell. Maybe they're paid off. I just don't know. I mean, I can't get them to enforce a common sense law, a common activity, you know. There's no enforcement of the law for those little guys, but believe me, if you're a politician, they're going to enforce the law against anybody who does anything against a politician. There is no justice in this nation. Why? Because there's no truth. We have become the people of the lie. We love their lies. We love hearing the smooth things. We love celebrating Christmas. Christ wasn't born in Christmas. Yahshua was born at the time of the Feast of Tabernacles. He wasn't born when there was snow on the ground. Read the Bible, folks. It'll tell you. It'll describe for you stuff. And reread the Bible because you'll pick up other things from it. You need this, folks. You need to be able to defend yourselves. And right now, they've lied to us so much that we don't know right from wrong. We don't know our left from our right. We don't know up from down. We don't know good from evil. We cannot think for ourselves because they have determined all of the assumptions. When you control the assumptions of the argument, you guide people to the proper conclusion. That happens even in my case, so I have to be very careful. I'm aware of it. That's the only advantage I have. And I'll tell you a story about that when I went behind the Iron Curtain and the lesson I got from a beautiful woman. Might just do that as a separate video by itself. Okay, take care. I thank you for bearing with me and hanging with me today. What was that famous sentence? Certainly, if we don't hang together, we will be hung together. We all have to hang together, folks. We do need to talk to one another. Read the Bible, and when you find somebody to talk about it with, that's the best thing you can do. Don't go to these churches anymore. The churches are all headed, they're all controlled. A fallen angel is at the head of every one of these organized religions on the planet at this point. The newest religion, the Sikh religion, is probably the most innocent of those. It's a rather nice religion formulated in the 17th century. I think that would be the 18th century, 1700s. It was a synthesis of several things, and there's probably more religion in India than the rest of the world combined. We have a lot to learn from those folks, including our own nature from a long time ago. I think that I've been on the planet a lot longer than what we realize. We have a lot to learn. And there's so much history that has to be written down accurately. There's so much science that needs to be discovered and put into the proper words to make it easy for the rest of us to understand. There's so many inventions that are depriving us of. We could have almost immortality right now. They've got it. It's just pretty incredible. We should have free energy at this point, which would make us all wealthy on the planet. If you had free energy, I mean, you could keep yourself warm. You could keep yourself air conditioned. This global warming stuff is a big lie. They know about the cycles of the earth. They swiped the books at Alexandria not once but twice. They've got all the old manuscripts from the old previous civilizations hidden, buried away from us so that we don't get to see those. They've been controlling us and controlling all of this stuff for so long. We really need to break out of it. But are we ready for it? Are we mature enough? Do we have the fortitude? Do we have the strength? Can we think well enough? And I have to say that we really can't at this point. You got to read the Bible, folks. Good day.